I'm gonna tie, I'm just gonna kind of freestyle a fly or two. But we're gonna do something with deer or elk hair. We're gonna do a stimulator. Anybody ever fished the Sculpzilla before? It's a streamer. It's a very effective pattern. That's one that we haven't done on our YouTube channel, so that'll be the first. I've been doing a complex twist Sculpzilla. I know Mark likes to fish streamers a lot, so. And then probably a chronomid or something. But what I want to focus on is kind of go into detail on some of the materials and why I use some of those. So we might not tie a ton of flies while we're sitting here, but I'm going to go into detail about why I choose some of the materials that I do and kind of how I do things. But first of all, has anybody ever heard of Fly Fish Food before? You've heard of the site. So Curtis Fry and I own a shop called Fly Fish Food. Most people have been down there. We have a shop in Orem. I have to say that at the beginning of the demo, so just in case you haven't. But we focus on kind of creative flies that might solve a problem that haven't been solved already, but creative stuff. I'm an artist. That's how I got into fly fishing. I did art in high school quite a bit, so this is kind of the medium that I choose now. But the other thing is we have a YouTube channel with over 300 videos now. You can either watch us tie flies or you can watch us banter back and forth with each other as we fish. So we have a few vlog style videos. We do a lot of stillwater fishing. We do a lot of river fishing. This is my family right here, so bad attitude. Anyway, so we'll do the streamer first. And I can't see what you guys see, so if anything's fuzzy or if I need to hold something up or down or whatever, just shout out. I usually have Curtis yelling at me to behave myself behind the camera. But this fly is designed to be a shanked fly. I hope I brought those shanks. Oh. Okay, so for the back half of this fly, it kind of hangs on a piece of the original fly called for backing, but I use braided line. For those of you who don't know me, I have a bass boat. I have a bunch of heathen gear, bait casters and spinning rods. I love fishing that way for bass, so I have a whole bunch of 65-pound braided line. This stuff's better than backing to create your articulation tails that really want to move a lot. For streamers, for just a double hooked streamer, I prefer just like the nylon coated stainless steel wire like beadlawn. But for certain applications, Power Pro is your friend. And you can get it at Walmart. This is brand new kit that I haven't even broken out yet, so we'll see how good the loon stuff is right out of the box. But the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take a healthy section of braid, and I find it easiest to string these on with the hook in the vise. So I'm just going to poke it through, come underneath it, and then poke it back through the other side. Okay, so once I have this kind of how I want it, I'll trim that off, and you can dial in kind of how much you need if you want to pre-cut a bunch of these so you don't waste a bunch of it like I always do. So once I have that tied on here, I'm just going to tie on my thread, and I'm going to cover up that little almost knot that I made here. So from here, what I'm going to do is I want this hook to ride hook point up. So when I fish this fly, I can really just drag it along the rocks and it won't snag. So in order to do that, I'm going to take a piece of zonker strip. This one's, I think, a tiger barred zonker in olive and black, something like that. And a lot of times when you tie zonkers onto hooks, they foul around the hook point. You want to make sure that that doesn't happen. So the best way to do that, I'm going to tie this in right here at the hook eye, but I'm going to tie it on the underside like this. So if I make sure that the leather doesn't go past the bend of the hook, then I'm pretty much guaranteed that that's going to be able to move freely and it's not going to snag. So once I measure that out, I can find a little tie-in point in the rabbit. So if I lick my fingers, well, this is kind of a staticky piece. Whoever touches this fly is going to get some DNA on it. So I'm actually going to pull a little bit more back. So there's my tie-in point right here. So I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to tie this down. It's kind of a pain with all the junk hanging out the front of it. But once I have it tied in, I can pull that up and I'm just going to whip finish that. I'm going to use a hand whip finish because I can have a really wide circle. I don't like using a hand whip finish on most dry flies because it's not very precise and it's not very durable. The tension's not thick enough. So whenever I do a hand whip finish, I always put head cement on immediately. You guys are all thinking, what in the world are you tying right now? Because it doesn't look very good. I agree. I'm much more precise when I tie dries. Okay, so we've got this portion of the fly complete. Okay, so we're going to set that aside. Now the front part of the fly, you can either take a hook and cut off the hook point, or you can get these little shanks. I don't even think we sell these in the shop, so I technically shouldn't be tying with these. Don't tell Curtis. But it's just a micro hook shank, or a micro shank. And all it is it's a hook eye with nothing on the end of it. Okay? So this is going to be the front half of the fly. And I'm just going to stick it in my vise. You got to be careful with shanks in your vise, because if you put them too far forward, it will make little notches in your jaws, regardless of how good your vise is. Okay, so once that's in place, whoa. Okay, so we're gonna dress this hook. Now, this hook has to be, this junction that we're going to create has to be really, really tight wraps. If you don't do tight wraps, then this hook will, this fly will come undone. So I'm going to really lay down on the thread here. And if you're paranoid about this, one better way to keep these together is by taking a file and roughing up the shanks, that when you wrap your thread over it, it really grabs. But I'm usually not too worried about it. Whoa, what happened here? Okay, so now we're going to take this mess and I'm going to gauge how long I want the streamer to be. So this is going to be kind of a longer-ish fly. And I'm going to do the same thing I did in the front. I'm going to create a tie-in point. I'm going to get these pieces of braid out of the way. And I'm just going to tie that in. And it's a lot easier said than done to not trap down a bunch of rabbit here. So I'm tying in the rabbit to length. And once I have this in place, I can move this out of the way. Wait, I got to get my braid on either side of the hook first. And I'm going to keep that out of the way like that. So once I have this stuff out of the way, I can take these pieces of braid now, and I'm not going to pull on them yet. I'm just going to kind of trap them both down on the hook and make sure that I have them separated like that. And then I'm going to take this fly and kind of pull it out as long as the rabbit is, and then I can pull these to length. It's kind of, once you do this, it's going to be second nature, but it's kind of hard to explain what's going on here. But the idea is you basically want the braid and the rabbit to be the same length. And I find it's easier to get that if you tie them in separately. So now with those all out of the way, I'm going to tie those in all the way up with really snug wraps, and then instead of trimming them off, I'm just going to double that over on top of itself and lay those back. Don't use GSP for this part. If you like using GSP or Semperfli Nano Silk, a lot of guys use that. Don't use that for this part because the thread's way too slick. It won't grab, and then you will have a fly that comes apart. So let's pretend like I put super glue on it at this point instead of head cement. My super glue's at the table, but this head cement will still do the trick. Okay, so we basically created the tail. The reasoning for this, and you'll hear a lot of people who talk about brown trout, and that brown trout are predatory fish, right? They're apex predators in the water that they live in. And a lot of people will say a predatory fish will always eat their prey from the head first. And I agree with that for the most part. But the thing that we have to realize as fly fishers is we don't know exactly where every fish is in the river. So if I'm casting and I think that there's a fish kind of in the middle of the hole, and I cast up, up at the head of the hole, and when in reality that fish is up in front of where my fly is, he's still going to feel that fly, and he's going to come and hit it however he can. Okay, so that's one reason why I always like to have a stinger hook. The other reason is fish, when they have territory battles, think of, they don't have fists. They can't fight each other. So if a fish is going to go up to another fish and say, hey, get out of my territory, it's going to come and snip at it, right? It's not always going to snip at it at the head. He's going to chase it. The other fish is going to say, okay, grandpa fish is telling me to get out of his territory. He's going to try to run away, and the grandpa fish is going to grab him by the tail, right? And just snap at him. He's not trying to eat that fish. He's just trying to say, hey, get out of here. Same thing with streamers, larger streamers. They might not be ready for a meal like that, but they might say, hey, this is my territory, get out of here, to your streamer. So if they snip at the tail, you'll catch a lot more fish if you have a stinger at the tail. Additionally, I see a lot of articulated flies that are really small. So you like size 8 and size 8. My theory on articulating flies is think of how wide a fish's mouth is. So if you're chasing fish that are, this big, their mouth's going to be that wide. You don't need a stinger hook, right? They're going to be able to get that whole fly in their mouth with one bite. But if you're fishing the Provo River, the Weber, some of those other rivers with, 16 to 20 inch fish, their mouth is going to be about that wide. If your fly is over this width, you probably should put a stinger hook on, okay? But there's no sense in my mind to articulate a hook or a fly that's really, really small, because a fish that's going to eat a streamer will be able to get the whole thing in their mouth anyway. Does that make sense? Am I just rambling? Yeah? Okay. You can tell me to be quiet anytime, except for you, Audrey, you can't. Okay. So, has anybody heard of the fly called the complex twist bugger? Anybody? Yeah. So it's a fly that I developed a while back out of necessity because I didn't want to tie Cheech leeches for all my buddies that I was fishing with. So I spun up a few of these bugs, went out and fished them, and they crushed. They just did really, really well. They're simple, they're durable, and it uses a technique that I've now adapted for a lot of different other flies, including this one. So this is going to be using the technique I use for the complex twist bugger, which is on our website, but I'm going to use it to create the front half of this fly. So this material is a chenille that only has fibers on one side. This is called polar reflector flash. You can also get Palmer chenille. You can get polar chenille, which is this stuff with the UV fibers. But lots of different options in this stuff. Michelle. That's not cool. So I'm going to take one. These are cool. These are from Montana Fly, grizzly schlappen. And a lot of people who come in the shop want good long schlappen. This is a whiting American saddle. Okay, so if you turn this over and you grab these, like that's money schlappen right there. So these American saddles are awesome. Here's a white one, or I mean a yellow one. Look at that. That's whiting. Mark likes whiting stuff. Okay, so I'm going to take both of these. I'm going to create a tie-in point just by stroking down some of the fibers so I can tie them in tip first. So I'll tie those in tip first. And this is going to look really messy until we put the final product onto it. So don't worry. Okay, this is the cool part. So in this loon kit, there's a gator grip tool. I've already got one that's put together, so I'll just use it. But this is a tool that I helped Loon develop a few years back. And the idea is it's a dubbing twister, but instead of a hook, which it has a hook that you can use as well, but this one has little gator clips. So we're going to keep this rabbit out of the way. This is a mess, isn't it? So I'm going to grab the chenille and both pieces of hackle, and I'm going to lay those together. Okay? And I've had the best luck by crimping those together and then trimming off what I don't need. So the idea here is I'm going to rest this on my finger and I'm going to twist those up. And I have a little fancy comb here. I'm going to come in here and just kind of loosen those fibers. So you can see it's almost like I tied a woolly bugger just in this loop. So what happens here is the hackle stems and the core of the chenille are winding themselves together into a super durable brush. But that's basically the body of the fly. Now, here's a little trick for you. When you tie rotary style, most people will use the bobbin cradle, move their bobbin over here, and then wrap it. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to put the thread about where I want it. I'm going to grab my hackle here, and I'm going to use my pinky to hold that out of the way. I don't need to do a half hitch or anything because, you know, if it unravels, it's... What was that? Anyway. Maybe I'm... What? Yeah. All right. Well, you're going to have to deal with that. Well, maybe I should move it down further. Or talk softer. All right. Anyway. I'm going to trim this rabbit now. It's driving me nuts. Okay. So I'm going to wrap this forward. About to right here. And then I'm going to trim this off. Did everybody see how I did that rotary style? Pretty quick and easy. So I could have done a fly twice as long as this with this complex twist technique. I don't think it's my voice that's doing it. I'll blame it on the electronics. All right, so I reinforce that a little bit. I'll take my comb again and I'll just kind of brush those out. And now you can see I've got multiple colors and flash in that same body. If you were to do that by wrapping one fiber over the other, it would mat it all down. But by doing the complex twist version, it's actually a pretty lightweight body, doesn't retain a whole bunch of water. So it's good. All right, another unique thing, you guys played with these sculpin helmets at all? It's kind of a cool product that keeps the profile of a hook or the profile of a sculpin pretty flat. So I'm going to use one of these, but I'm not going to put it on yet. I'm just going to kind of size where I need to end the fly. So we're about where we want to be, so we can move forward. From here, I'm going to take this comb and just kind of part these feathers. What's going on?
I didn't do it.
Sure. Let's see if this helps. We'll try it this way. Can you still hear me? All right. Okay, so I'm going to part these feathers, and I'm going to pull this zonker strip now down the middle of this body. Another tie-in section. If you use snug wraps, it shouldn't take much to tie it down. Here's another trick that I didn't realize I was doing until someone pointed it out, but if you barely open your scissors, don't open them up all the way, just barely open them, and you slide them in right on top and bottom of that leather, and then just trim it off, you're not going to cut off any of these fibers onto this zonker strip, and you can use it for your next fly without having to waste any. So consider yourself educated on that. Okay, so what's that? Well, I thought I had a heckler, which wouldn't surprise. Okay, so we're going to create kind of a bulkier head now, and we're going to use a material called Bruiser Blend. You guys played with this stuff? This is the mega dispenser of it. Well, it's an acrylic dubbing, so it doesn't absorb water and it keeps its shape in the water. So I use this quite a bit with streamer heads because it kind of creates a little bit bulk. It's really easy to work with, and I actually developed this product. You can only get it through our shop. And I'm going to use a color that we developed. It's called Barf Brown. It's got just the proper amounts of greens and reds. There's an experience behind this. If you have kids, you end up naming stuff Barf Brown. Audrey, take notes. So I'm just going to take a clump of this. I'm going to put it right on top, and I'm going to do a loose wrap around it, maybe two, and then pull it straight down. Okay, and then I'm going to push it back on top of itself. I might have to move that a little bit forward. And now I'm going to pull it on top of itself, and I kind of want this to just stay right on top of the hook, because the belly of a sculpin, the more stuff you put on the bottom, the less profile it'll have. So I kind of want that just to be on top without my thread slipping off of it. That's all right if it does, though, because I'll just bind it down. Okay, so the trick with putting these helmets on is they've got to be glued in place, and I will need super glue for this. Dang it. Audrey, will you run to our booth and get me some super glue? There's other stuff we can do. She's running like a swimmer, very slowly. She plays water polo. So before I put the head on, though, I'm going to build up a little bit of dubbing, kind of into a cone shape, because if you just try to glue the head on and it doesn't have anything to kind of seep into, it's going to wiggle off. So I'm going to build up. It doesn't matter what you use for this. I just have this dubbing in front of me, so I'll use it. And this can be messy, and I kind of want to wrap my thread through it as well. That's too much. Strong work, Audrey.
This is Brandon.
This is Brandon's? Then we'll pour it out. Sorry, man, I used the whole thing. Okay, I just looked at this fly for a second, and it doesn't look very good right now, so we'll pretty it up a little bit. Another hand whip finish. All right, so we're ready for the head. So this Wapsi Z-Ment is actually created by Zap-A-Gap. It's the company that makes Zap-A-Gap, but Zap-A-Gap is either too thick or too thin for tying a lot of the time. So Wapsi worked with Z-Ment and they created a fly tying specific super glue, and it's a really good consistency. It doesn't turn white like some super glues do. It's got a nice brush on applicator, but I really like that stuff. So I just saturated all that dubbing with super glue, and now I'm just going to put that head on, and you can see it kind of makes a nice little sculpin-y profile. But we're not done yet. I do like to come in, and I'll do it with this orange thread to kind of create a hot spot. But you want to build up a little bit of bulk in front of the head so that if it does get wiggly, it won't pop off.
Any women that are signed up for the women's casting class meet at Bamboo Pursuits at 2 o'clock.
Oh, this is another cool thing. See this whip finisher? It's got a little blade on the back of it. We helped Loon develop this one as well. But the idea is it's not sharp enough to cut you. You know, if you really dug in, you probably could. But once you do your whip finish, you just flip it over and you just cut off your thread with the whip finisher. And that comes in this kit too. I'll leave that one in there. All right. This is the part, if you've ever tied with these sculpin helmets, this is the part you hate because you got to take those little tiny eyes and super glue them in place, and it's a pain in the butt. So what I've started doing actually in the last little bit is taking a marker, or I guess some markers, and I'm going to give it a little bit of a paint job, and then I'm going to put resin eyes in it instead of gluing eyes on. And it doesn't really matter what markers you use for this. This is the best way to travel with resin. Tape over the top so they don't spill out. Okay, so I'm going to take a black marker and I'm going to color the eye sockets black. And then I'm probably add a few dots on the head. Sculpins are very mottled. And then I'll take, I guess brown's not going to show up on brown. A little bit. And then you can get creative and color the bottom like a yellowy color that shows up better on the olive heads. Okay, you're thinking right now, well, that marker is just going to wash off as soon as you start fishing it. Well, I'll show you a way to prevent that. But first things first, we're going to tie on, or we're going to put on the eyes. So this is Loon thick resin. They have 3 different consistencies: thick, thin, and flow. How are we doing on time? What time did we start? All right, we got time for a stimulator. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this resin, and because it's thick, and I'll just put it in those eye sockets, it's going to kind of bug out like little eyes. I'll take this Loon lightsaber thinger and I'll set those eyes. You guys all played with UV resin before? Kind of cool stuff. Okay, now the UV resin will not adhere to metal. Like if I were to take something and dig it in there, those eyes would pop right out. So in comes Loon soft head. This stuff is awesome. So it looks white. You put it on white, but it dries clear. And so I'm just going to take a healthy coat of this and put it over the whole head. That's going to lock in the paint job we gave it, and it's going to lock those eyes in place. We'll just put a thin coat, but make sure that it encompasses everything. If you guys have seen the Mousy McMouse face pattern that I tie, this is where I started playing with Loon soft head, but this stuff is bulletproof. Anyway, that's the Complex Twist Sculpzilla, and it's really swingy. It's got a lot of movement, and we need to let this hang for 20 minutes or so to let this dry. But once it dries, It's phenomenal. I don't like using UV resin to coat the head because the resin's just not as durable as the soft head. This stuff remains flexible, so if it gets hit by a rock, it just keeps on ticking. So we'll put that right there. Yeah, sure.
I may have missed this. So you're not using GSP thread. What thread are you using?
I just use normal 140 denier ultra thread. That or 210 denier Danville. So anything like that works great. I only use GSP if I'm really yanking down on deer hair. So anyway, any other questions on that one? Just a dumb streamer. I know, you can just tie a woolly bugger and it will work the same.